Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here with you guys. It's exciting to be any place where people begin to expand their ideas, their imagination, their thinking. I remember the first TED I was ever a part of. It was in Arusha, Tanzania in 2007. And I was so excited to be there. But one of the great challenges with events like this is that you're overwhelmed by so many incredible people. And I grew up fairly socially introverted and awkward. And so I was on the phone walking into TED, and my daughter was on the phone with me telling me, remember, Dad, don't just go hide in the corner. Go talk to people. Make eye contact, smile. Don't look scary. And I'm looking for people, and I think I'm going to find the kindest person in the room. And I saw this woman. She looked so kind. And she was in line at the buffet line, so I got up right behind her, and I said, hi, my name's Erwin. And she told me her name, and I said, is this your first TED? And she gave me her background, and I said, would you like to have lunch together? And she said, of course. And so we sat down at this table, and all of a sudden we were talking together. It's so easy to meet people at TED. And then about 8 other people joined us almost right away, and yet they never interrupted us. It was just me and her having this long conversation. But have you ever talked to someone that was so passionate about something that no matter what you talked to them about, they were going to talk about whatever they want to talk about? It was one of those moments. And so she asked me a question, and I said, well, I'm really interested in the geopolitical condition of China. And she said, oh, you know, chimpanzees have geopolitical systems. And then we talked a little longer, and I said, well, you know, I'm really interested in human relationships. And she goes, you know, chimpanzees have relationships. And no matter what I talked about, she would always go back to chimpanzees. And I kept thinking to myself, this person is incredibly fixated by chimps. And after about an hour, I looked at her, and I said, Jane, could I ask you a question? And she said, yes. And I said, are you Jane Goodall? And she goes, of course I am. And I thought, oh, that explains the whole chimpanzee thing. And every single person, I met at TED was an expert at something. I mean, they had a species. They were the people who marched with the penguin. And the person who studied one particular bee as it migrated across Central America in October. And the longer I was there, the more I felt I didn't belong. And you always get that terrifying question, and what do you do? And I would avoid that question as long as I could, because I've done a lot of things, which means I really don't do anything well. And so that's the way I began answering. I said, well, I do a lot of things, but nothing well. And people started responding, oh, you're a writer. And that is what I am. I'm a writer, and that's why I write. It's because people who do things well, they don't have time to write. They don't need to write, but people like me, we need to write. And so I found my life journey going through a lot of different places, working as a futurist, working in the fashion industry, working as a filmmaker. And one of the things I'm always a little reticent to mention, I've also lived my life as a pastor. Which is a terrifying thing. You never want to tell anyone you're a pastor, because it's like saying, hi, I'm a cannibal. Would you like to have lunch? And so I try to be a little cautious with that. But what I want to talk to you for a few moments is about what makes us uniquely human. Because after so many experiences like this one, I went home and I told my wife, Kim, I need a species. I cannot go back without a species. I have a huge species deficit. And I'm too old to start from scratch. And so I thought to myself, what species have I been paying attention to? And I realized that I've been a human almost all of my life. And that humans are actually my favorite species. I love observing humans from a distance. And not that closely, but I love watching what you do. And I say you because I'm really an outsider and observing your behavior. And one of the things I notice is that human beings have so many characteristics that are replicated or shadowed in other species that we could say, well, that's uniquely human, but then you see empathy, and you see a sense of intelligence, and you see an aspect of creativity and organization in all these different species. But what I began realizing is one of the unique things about humans is that we materialize the invisible. That in fact, the whole creative process is the materializing of the invisible. If you're going to create, you have to imagine. And if you're going to imagine, you have to become comfortable working with invisible material. If you're going to optimize your effectiveness in the future, you need to maximize your resources. And if you're going to maximize your resources, you need to understand your resource. And I think we have a misunderstanding of the resource that exists within the human organism. Every human being brings this unique quality to the table that so oftentimes is overlooked. In the same way that bees create hives and ants create colonies, humans create futures. What is unique about humans is that we imagine and we create. I stopped writing books for about 6 years and went off and did a few other things. And my wife, Kim, kept asking me to go back and start writing again. And so finally, I listened to her and I began writing another book. And she came up to me in the living room where I was working and she said, you're writing again. And I said, yes, I'm writing again. She goes, what are you writing about? And I said, it's called ARTISAN. And that was the working title I had before it finally was published as The Artisan Soul. And she said, Artisan? What a brilliant thought. I don't even know how I was given the privilege to marry you. You are genius in skin. That's what she should have said. But that's not what she said, because we've been married for 30 years and she went way past that in the dating phase. And she looked at me and she said, oh, great, a book for people like you, but what about the rest of us? And it made me angry, first of all, because she didn't respond the way she should have, but really because she had believed the lie that there were two different kinds of people. There were those rare people who were creatives, those rare people who were artists, those rare people who materialize the invisible, and then there's the rest of us who are just ordinary, average, and have nothing unique to contribute to the human story. What's strange is my wife is so creative. If you met us together, you would realize she's color and I'm cardboard. When I met my wife, she was an actress. Her favorite personalities were people like Carol Burnett and Lucille Ball, and my wife was a mime, which is sort of terrifying, but I still thought it was cute. But my wife was also an orphan, abandoned by her parents at the age of 8, living in a government project, left starving with nothing but turnips and ketchup. Lived in a foster home from the age of 8 to 18, was never told I love you one time, was essentially a child slave working a farm. And all of her life was told that she was never going to amount to anything. Her 9 brothers and sisters, most of them became homeless and indigent and drug addicts and drug dealers. And all of her life she was told, you're going to be just like them. And so her response, after decades of being freed from that environment, was still the product of that experience. What about the rest of us? I want to take a brief survey. I mean, this is a very unique group of people, and so maybe we'll be disproportionately skewed in this room. How many of you would say that, I know you want to be modest, but I'm just going to ask you to respond. How many would say, I'm a creative savant? Raise your hand. Okay, the front row, okay? And all right, a few people here and there, but most of you, 99% of you, are not responding with an affirmative, I'm a creative savant. All right, let me try another question. Maybe I can get more of you involved. How many would say that I am a linguistic savant? Raise your hand. Okay, fewer of you, okay? And I thought it would be a little higher. So you wouldn't say you're a creative genius, and you would not say you're a linguistic savant, but I'm going to propose to you that you actually are a linguistic savant. You just forgot. How many of you here speak English? Okay, if you didn't raise your hand, I hope there's a translator sitting next to you. And I'm kind of curious, how many of you here speak Mandarin? Okay, all right, that's very, very good. You see, unless I'm wrong, you learned one of the most difficult languages in the world, whether it's English or Mandarin or both. Not when you were 21, or not after you finally received your PhD, or not after you received your master's degree, but you learned how to speak one of the most difficult languages in the world when you were 2. You were 2 years old, and you were mastering English. You could barely walk, and you were mastering English. You couldn't even make it to the toilet, and you were mastering English. You were incapable of getting employment, and you were mastering English. Why? Because when you were born, you were a linguistic savant. You just forgot you were. And in fact, every single one of you, if they had moved you to Tokyo, you would have learned Japanese. If they had moved you to the Philippines, you would have learned Tagalog. If they'd moved you to Brazil, you would have learned Portuguese. If they'd moved you to England, you would have finally learned English. And no matter who you are in this room or what language you speak, at the age of 2, you had the capacity of learning any language, and it was simply child's play. In the same way that you were a linguistic savant, you were a creative genius. But we forgot who we were. See, we need to remember that human beings are essentially artisans, that we are creativity wrapped up in skin, that we imagine a world we've never seen, imagine a life we've never lived, imagine a person we've never become. But the problem is our imagination is both a gift and a curse. It is a gift when we imagine ideals, and so we imagine a world without hunger, and so we create programs to feed the poor. We imagine a world where there is freedom and liberty, so we work toward bringing everyone that opportunity to be free. We imagine a world where everyone has an opportunity to create, so we create businesses and jobs. We imagine ideals, and we create because of those ideals, but we also imagine who we are not and what we're not experiencing, the life we're not living, and the world we're not creating, and it becomes a curse to us. Have you ever wondered why we're so unhappy as successful as we are? I mean, there are just no antelopes out there going, I don't know, I'm not feeling really fulfilled with my life. And there are no gazelles going, can't you see what's going on? We're all part of the system. We've been standardized, we've been conformed. I'm breaking out. I'm done. We get up, we eat grass. We hear the roar, we run. We don't look back. We pretend no one's missing. We go get water. We eat a little more grass. We go to sleep. We get up next day. We're just a part of the machine. Wouldn't it be great if Gazelle got up and said, I'm tapping out. I'm no longer going to be the hunted. Now I'm the hunter. Who's going with me? I'm going after a lion. It would be a one-day career. See, you're an engineer and you're successful and everyone thinks you should be fulfilled. But in your soul, you want to be a painter. You're a doctor and you're making great wealth and you're actually helping people, but inside of your soul, you long to be a humanitarian. You're a teacher, and you decide that you want to become an actor, and you're a tech entrepreneur, and you decide you want to be a movie producer. It's amazing how we humans can imagine a life we've never lived, a self we've never become. I'm telling you, there's no water buffalo out there going, I want to be a dancer. No giraffe, I want to paint, but I have hooves. But humans, we are driven by the invisible. And that invisible world inside of us is translated into the external world. We create who we are because we are all artists. The question is not whether you will create. The question is what kind of world will you create? And here's the dilemma. We will never outthink ourselves. We will always create out of the essence of our soul. And if your soul isn't healthy, then you will not create a better world. We create out of who we are. We are informed by the outside world and formed by the outside world, but we create from the inner world. And if you were like me when I was a child, I found my internal world dark and broken. By the time I was 12 years old, I was in a psychiatric chair. I found myself an overachiever in psychosis. I had disappeared into an imaginary world, hiding from the real world. And then one day I became cognizant of this beautiful truth, that we can either hide inside of our imaginations or take our imagination and create a better world. For the future is waiting to be created by the person with the courage to take their ideas and their ideals and make it the world that all humanity needs. For me, this is why I was so compelled by the words and teachings of Jesus. When he looked at a mass of humanity that everyone else felt was worthless, and he said to them, you are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. I was compelled by a person who looked into my soul and said, I see potential in you that you're blind to. I don't know if you've noticed, but my name doesn't match who I am. My name is Erwin Raphael McManus. I'm not Irish. I'm Spanish. I'm not German. I'm Spanish. In fact, Erwin was never my name. I went to my grandfather in El Salvador and I said, Papi, I need a good American name. He didn't know a good American name. He'd never been to the States. But he wasn't going to tell me that, so he started making it up. He said, pues un nombre. Este nombre tiene que expresar. This name needs to express genius. This name needs to be a name of someone who's brilliant and a conqueror and courageous. I go, no, I'm just 10. I just don't want to get beat up. I want a name that helps me fit in. And my grandfather said, su nombre es Erwin. And I said, ¿qué? And he said, Erwin. And I did not really appreciate that moment. I mean, who wants to be named Erwin? And I said, what? And he wrote it down, E-R-W-I-N. And then he named me after Erwin Rommel, Hitler's general in World War II. And I have lived with the curse of this name for 56 years. But you know why I couldn't change it? See, I grew up having all these voices telling me who I was not. All these voices telling me what I could not become. All these voices telling me that I did not have value or worth. But in this one moment, my grandfather looked at me and said, you want to disappear into the backdrop of society. You want to become invisible. But I'm giving you a name that lets you know that there is something waiting to be created out of your soul that would be a gift to the world. And if no one's ever told you this, you are both a work of art and an artist at work. You are a human. We breathe, and therefore we create.